In 1914, an Archduke of Austria-Hungary was shot by a Serbian nationalist. This led, after a series of nations signing treaties with other nations, to one of the bloodiest conflicts ever fought. A war that was unlike any that had been fought at the time. Trench combat, mud, and sandbags, newer, deadlier advancements in the art of warfare, vile, incurable, and fatal diseases, and months upon months of misery, all while trapped in dark, dank dugouts. The Great War, the First World War. It's gone by many names since its ceasefire in 1918, and while there aren't many left of the generation that remembers it, there are still plenty of scars left on the world that remind us of the horrors. But there's one that seems to be keeping those wounds fresh, reminding us that war is, indeed, hell, as that rough beast slouches towards its destination. This is SCP-2574, what appears from the outset to be nothing more than a stone sculpture of a lion comprised of sandstone and living tissue. Standing at around 12 meters tall, SCP-2574 is much more than a mere statue. In fact, it is a living creature. After all, this is the SCP Foundation we're talking about here, where inanimate objects are rarely inanimate at all, or will at least possess some form of anomalous properties setting apart anything ordinary, and thus drawing the interest of the Foundation. SCP-2574 is similar in that regard, and not just for being a living statue creature. For one, the anomaly is capable of movement, albeit at a gradual rate that only progresses between 3 and 5 kilometers per day. Attempts by the Foundation to slow or halt the movement of SCP-2574 have been so far unsuccessful, as it seems that any obstacle placed in its path are unable to deter it. This includes both man-made and naturally occurring obstructions, meaning there is little that can be deployed to keep SCP-2574 physically contained. Even if a body of water is in its path, the entity can swim at a rate of between 2 and 3 kilometers per day, and will normally either crush or climb over any obstacle on land. At the previous annual budgeting meeting, the top minds of the Foundation's accounting department revealed to an infuriated O5 council that SCP-2574 had been responsible for an estimated total of $25.3 million in damages since its discovery. The second most pressing matter raised during that presentation was that 112 deaths and a further 625 injuries the anomaly had also caused. Despite pleas from the Ethics Committee, the Foundation accountants were still adamant that the cost of damages was more significant. Now, a number of prevailing questions might be plaguing you regarding SCP-2574. For one, what does this creature want? If it has freedom of movement and can't be physically obstructed by the Foundation, then is it just aimlessly wandering free and causing wanton destruction? Or does it have a specific want or goal it seeks to attain? And for another, what does an almost 40-foot-tall lion have to do with World War I? Well, it might surprise you to know that SCP-2574 has everything to do with the Great War. Literally everything. And as for a goal, it has one. Or rather, it has a specific destination it seems to be gradually heading towards. And if it makes it all the way there, it could spell disaster for the entire globe. In fact, it could plunge us back into one of the most devastating conflicts the world has ever seen. Can you guess which one? SCP-2574 possesses a wide array of latent anomalous effects, beyond its general functionality and movement. Above the sandstone-lined creature, it is constantly surrounded by a flock of around 6,000 birds of prey. Any that find themselves flying into the path of SCP-2574 are assimilated into the growing flock, designated as SCP-2574-1. The mass of birds is fixated on attacking SCP-2574, swooping low to strike at its smooth muscle tissue with using their beaks and talons. This, however, seems to do little to deter SCP-2574 from making progress, as the anomaly constantly regenerates from physical damage it incurs from SCP-2574-1. Perhaps the most notable and noticeable of SCP-2574's anomalous properties is the effect it has on its surroundings as it progresses towards its destination. The area around SCP-2574 will undergo a physical transformation in response to the presence of the lion. This transformation results in the nearby region temporarily becoming a World War I-era combat zone. The ground below becomes riddled with trenches carved through the earth. Thick, muddy bogs and coiled, razor-sharp nets of barbed wire litter the area. The change triggered by SCP-2574 is hardly just a cosmetic one either. The Foundation have observed a number of First World War-related manifestations that occur in the wake of SCP-2574. Man-made landmasses like trenches and dugouts will appear nearby, the front lines reappearing after more than a century. Weaponry from the area is also present following the arrival of SCP-2574, and this isn't just limited to firearms. World War I was one of the earliest large-scale conflicts in history, wherein both sides deployed aerial attacks through the use of biplanes, as well as chemical warfare. As a result, signs of these can also be found whenever SCP-2574 is nearby. But again, the transformation SCP-2574 brings about is not just limited to recreating battlefields. What some of you may not know is the Great War did not so much revolve around a core idealistic difference between both sides as its successor did. Instead, the First World War was a geopolitical grudge match between large global superpowers, attempting to make grandiose displays of their amassed military strength. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria at the hands of a Serbian extremist group was the catalyst that set off a chain reaction of events that ultimately led to war. As a result of this, SCP-2574's anomalous influence also extends to the social and political state of the areas it enters. A country that the sandstone leonine entity enters will suffer a rapid change in its local population's mentality. The ordinary people living there will start to experience a great degree of discontent towards their government, while the ruling powers of said country will increase its use of force against its own civilians. This effect is more noticeably potent when SCP-2574 interacts with countries that were directly involved in the First World War, increasing levels of civil unrest and discontentment among the population. These are often countered with worryingly increased levels of police brutality, along with governments enacting aggressive foreign policies and sometimes antagonizing other countries, as if they are eager to fight. These effects don't necessarily worsen the closer SCP-2574 gets to a particular country, but do seem to increase the more it approaches its predicted destination. And where is that, you may ask? The Foundation have calculated that based on SCP-2574's trajectory since its emergence back in 2012, the entity is headed for the city of Sarajevo, the capital city of Bosnia and Herzegovina. What possible reason could SCP-2574 have for wanting to venture towards this specific Bosnian city? Well, one cursory glance at the history of Sarajevo will give you the answer. It's where the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand took place, the event commonly attributed with starting the First World War. The transformative effects SCP-2574 has on its surroundings began when the leonine Leviathan first appeared and commenced its journey towards Sarajevo on December 24, 2012. Since then, the SCP Foundation has been closely monitoring the sandstone creature's movements and attempting to log all of the anomalous effects it has had over the course of making its way closer to the site of Franz Ferdinand's assassination. Over 5,000 kilometers away, to the east of Kazakhstan's capital Astana, SCP-2574 caused an unusual World War I anomalous effect. Any written works published in either Russian or Kazakh began to randomly feature passages from Irish poet W.B. Yeats. These extracts from his body of work range from single sentences to entire poems being featured in other writers' publications, regardless of author or genre. Yeats, for anyone unfamiliar, was widely considered one of the greatest poets of the 20th century. However, unlike the authors of numerous poems and songs to come out of the First World War, W.B. Yeats was never directly involved in the conflict itself and didn't write much about it, barring a few notable exceptions, but more on him in a moment. When SCP-2574 approached Russia, things started to escalate. clouds of deadly chlorine gas, an early World War I chemical weapon, began forming in rural areas throughout Europe that couldn't be dispersed for days at a time. As soon as the towering anomaly got close enough, Russian military forces began launching a series of drone strikes and aerial bombardments targeting SCP-2574. When these attacks failed, tensions mounted with bordering countries, the situation only getting worse when it was discovered through an intelligence leak that Russia was planning a nuclear strike against the creature, a move that likely could have spelled disaster for the neighboring countries. SCP-2574, of course, sustained no damage and continued on its course. Given that they couldn't physically contain SCP-2574, the Foundation was forced to think outside of the box when it came to coming up with some kind of solution. There were already too many eyewitnesses aware of the leonine leviathan's existence to consider administering amnestics, even on a large scale. The fact was, too many people already knew about SCP-2574 and would make such a move pointless. The best that the Foundation could do to combat, if not counteract, the effects of SCP-2574 was to work directly with governments affected by the creature's World War I transformative effects, to try and repair the damage left in the anomaly's wake, and ease the tension and violence it caused. It became the Foundation's job to deter any country planning an armed military response to the presence of SCP-2574, as any such strike would endanger both their military and civilian populations, while causing no damage to the anomaly. In the interest of trying to solve the problems posed by SCP-2574 reverting parts of Europe to hellish First World War-era battlefields, the Foundation made a rare agreement to collaborate with another large organization specializing in the anomalous, the Global Occult Coalition. Working directly with the GOC, their goal was to create a large-scale memetic countermeasure that would effectively reset the toll SCP-2574 had exacted on global psychology by altering people's temperaments and creating mass political unrest as it progressed towards the Bosnian capital. However, given the tense history between the SCP Foundation and the Global Occult Coalition, their attempts at creating a memetic countermeasure are still ongoing, since neither group wants the other to engage them in full-scale memetic warfare. As such, the proposed countermeasure will consist of two parts, with neither organization being able to replicate the other's half. Meanwhile, SCP-2574's progress across Europe was responsible for a number of other significant changes, physically, socially, and politically recreating the conditions of the First World War. Poppies, a flower that has since become synonymous with the remembrance of the conflict, began to grow in regions within Russia where they wouldn't naturally occur. This included within urban locations, the red flowers sprouting in and around buildings. As a result of such a high-profile anomaly causing such widespread unrest to spread, a number of religious cults centered around SCP-2574 began to form, while the living descendants of World War I veterans began suffering from vivid hallucinations that depicted their ancestors' first-hand experience of the fighting. These cults began to amass more and more of those affected by SCP-2574. The SCP Foundation was able to observe some of the sermons delivered by these religious cults, who appeared to view the public appearances of SCP-2574 as signs of an impending apocalypse.
"Come to us and embrace your salvation,"
one cult leader exclaimed in a sermon.
"Discover the words of the prophet Yates, who spoke this sacred truth that all of history is a spiral, and that we have spiraled outwards towards chaos. Learn the true nature of the Second Coming."
It appeared that some of these cults viewed the poetry of W.B. Yeats as prophetic in regards to SCP-2574. They would often reference the Second Coming, which, interestingly, was the name of one of his poems written in the aftermath of World War I. Yeats's The Second Coming refers to a rough beast slouching towards Bethlehem. The SCP Foundation has since uncovered some erratic writings made by the poet before his death that allude to Bethlehem, despite no record existing of him ever traveling there. It is believed that Yeats somehow figured out what SCP-2574 was, and that the closer it gets to its destination, the more civilization will spiral further out of control towards total, all-consuming chaos. Further research by the Foundation also uncovered a testimony made by Gavrilo Princip, the Serbian man responsible for assassinating Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria, and thus sparking the First World War. Princip seems to have had some knowledge about SCP-2574, and apparently killed the Archduke as a way to begin the creature's journey in order to make society more chaotic. With SCP-2574 progressing worryingly closer to the site of Franz Ferdinand's assassination, further chaos rapidly began to spread. Anarchic sentiments took hold of most of Europe, leading to an increased rate of violent encounters between civilians and police in many countries, including Ireland, France, Great Britain, and Italy, with a number of these experiencing widespread rioting in their major population centers. Any government or political party compelled by SCP-2574 to openly espouse the same anarchist sentiments were soon seeing a rapid increase in their public approval, gaining more popularity in polls than their opposition. As a result of these heightened tensions between the public and the government of their countries, assassination attempts of politicians saw an alarming increase of around 60%. SCP-2574 caused countries that had existing hostile relations to engage in armed skirmishes at their borders, with at least one of these battles occurring every 2 weeks, and each time threatening to spark a much larger scale conflict. Thanks to the anomaly's effects, the international tensions, dissolving alliances between countries, and adoption of nationalism, which were all factors leading to the start of the Great War, were beginning to rapidly spread once again. By the time SCP-2574 was around 550 kilometers from Sarajevo, people began experiencing injuries common among soldiers during World War I. Many patients would die during surgery, only for their bodies to disappear shortly afterwards. Conflict erupted between Ireland and England, and as SCP-2574 entered Bosnia and Herzegovina, many began to report suffering intense dreams about the anomaly. A number of these reports seem to state that SCP-2574 was attempting to communicate with them, and multiple websites began logging the sandstone lion's appearance in their dreams. And things will only get worse the closer SCP-2574 gets to Sarajevo. SCP-2574 contains the raw energy of World War I, one of the most catastrophic events in human history, a global conflict with a death toll in the tens of millions. The SCP Foundation estimates it'll reach the site of Franz Ferdinand's assassination within a month. And from that point, given the effect it's had on the rest of Europe, there's only one likely outcome when that rough beast slouches towards its ultimate destination: war. Now check out SCP-186 to End All Wars, and World War II German SCPs Explained for more.